Most of us turn off the light after reading a short story at night and head to bed. Many of us don't think about it the next day, but the same couldn't be said for Antino Gavin. After reading The Red-Headed League, one of the Sherlock Holmes series written by Arthur Conan Doyle, Antino Gavin became absorbed in the idea. He used this book as a manual for committing theft, drawing inspiration from the theft methods mentioned in the book and trying his luck to become a millionaire. In 1971, Antino Gavin decided to put his plans into action, resulting in one of the most historic and bizarre bank robberies in British history. During these heists, valuable objects and jewels worth £3 million were stolen from the safe deposit box of a bank in central London, which seemed impenetrable at first glance. However, this incident had other consequences, leading to a major scandal within the British royal family, which the British government had been covering up for years. Arthur Antino Gavin initially chose a branch of the Lewis Bank on Baker Street in London for the theft. After identifying his target, he began meticulous planning for what would later be known as the Baker Street robbery. He knew that he couldn't pull off such a heist alone and had to form a group to execute it. He assigned responsibilities to each member of this group to follow through with his plan. The first person to join this group was one of Antino Gavin's friends named Reginald Tucker. Tucker was a car salesman, and his task within the group was to gain access to the bank's vault before the robbery. The bank's policy at the time allowed its customers to enter the vault alone, where the safe deposit boxes were located. Tucker's job was to rent a safe deposit box at the bank to gain access to the vault and survey the area. One day he bought expensive clothes and made himself look like a wealthy individual before heading to the bank. Undoubtedly, bank employees Sam Tucker was just another wealthy customer who had chosen the bank to store his valuable belongings. As soon as he entered the vault, with a parachute in hand, he began measuring the area. This place was crucial for the entire team because they wanted to build a tunnel under the bank and create a large hole in the middle of the bank vault, ultimately executing a Hollywood-style heist. Since Tucker knew that bank personnel could enter the vault at any moment and see him measuring the area, he deliberately didn't bring a measuring tape to avoid arousing suspicions. Instead, he used the parachute he had in his hand to measure the area. The second person to join the group was Thomas Stevens, a friend and former colleague of Tucker's. They used to sell cars together before this incident. Stevens' task within the group was to procure the necessary tools for tunneling and breaking the concrete floor of the bank vault. The third member added to the group was Benjamin Wolfe. The oldest member at around 60 years old, his job was to rent a shop located 2 floors below the bank. This shop would serve as the starting point for the tunneling operation. The fourth member added to the group was Bobby Mills. His role was to act as a lookout from a high vantage point overlooking the street leading to the bank. If the police arrived, he would quickly alert the group. The fifth member added to the group was Mickey Skinner, a licensed electrician. Interestingly, there were several other members in this group whose identities remain a mystery to this day. However, a few years later, a person named Brian Ryder was arrested during the robbery, very similar to the Baker Street robbery. The police believed that Ryder was also a member of Antino Gavin's group, but he never admitted to these allegations. Once the group was complete, they began digging the tunnel from the rented shop, which was only 2 floors below the bank. They mostly worked on weekends, but their task proved to be much more challenging than they had anticipated. Ultimately, they managed to dig a 12-meter tunnel with a width of 40 centimeters, but they encountered a major obstacle when they reached the ceiling of the bank vault, which was made of 1 meter thin concrete. It was time for Thomas Stevens to use the heavy tools he had brought to overcome the obstacle. Initially, he attempted to break the barrier using an industrial jack capable of exerting a force equivalent to 100 tons, but this attempt had failed. He then turned to his next tool, a thermal lance. Stevens tried to create cuts on the concrete surface using the heat generated by the thermal lance to break it. However, the concrete was too solid due to its 1 meter thickness, and this tool didn't help either. With his patience running out, Stevens finally decided to use the most powerful tool at his disposal, explosives. Initially, other members of the group opposed this suggestion because they had planned a covert theft, and such an action could create a lot of noise, jeopardizing their plans. However, when they couldn't find any other solution to break through their formidable barrier, they decided to carry out the explosion during the weekend, time to coincide with the loud noises of traffic. To attract less attention, they decided to use controlled explosion to remove the barrier. Until this point, everything seems to have gone smoothly, with the group successfully digging a 12-meter tunnel and entering the bank without arousing suspicion. However, in reality, things weren't as smooth as they appeared. Throughout the robbery, the entire group stayed in communication via wireless devices. The problem was that someone else was also listening to their conversations, a radio enthusiast named Robert Lawrence. As Rollins was scanning radio frequencies to find his desired program, he suddenly stumbled upon a live broadcast of the robbery. Initially, he thought it was a radio program and started listening. However, he quickly realized from their conversation that they were using a wireless frequency. At that moment, the group was in the midst of the theft. Rollins immediately contacted the local police and reported one of the strangest robberies in history. However, the officer on the other end of the line thought it was a prank and warned Rollins to stop or face consequences before hanging up. Undeterred, Rollins kept recording the conversation as evidence. The group was discussing their fatigue and the need for a break, planning to resume work after an hour. Rollins then contacted the main police station and informed them about the recorded conversation, providing evidence to support his claim. Several officers were dispatched to investigate the situation. When they arrived at Rollins' house and were examining the recorder sound, they suddenly heard the wireless transmission of the thieves from the radio. They realized that a major robbery was taking place at the bank. The problem was that the thieves didn't mention which bank they were robbing during their conversations. At that time, there were 750 banks in London, and the police had no choice but to visit each one of assess the situation and issue a warning about a potential robbery. When the police arrived at the Louis Bank on Baker Street, the robbery was still in progress. Upon reaching the back door of the bank vault, they saw it sealed with a time-locked seal, preventing entry before the time expired. Sensing high security at the bank, the officers assumed everything was safe, and while Gavin and his group were emptying the safe deposit boxes, they moved on to the next bank. However, it was the next day when the crime scene was finally discovered. Bank employees at Louis Bank were confronted with a horrifying scene when they opened the vault. A deep hole in the middle of the safest bank in England and 268 empty safe deposit boxes. The value of the stolen assets was estimated to be around £3 million. Gavin had left a message on the wall for the police, which read, "Now let's see how Sherlock Holmes solves this case." However, contrary to their assumptions, the police didn't need a fictional detective with supernatural powers to solve this case. If you remember, the oldest member of the group was Benjamin Wolfe. When Wolfe rented the shop 2 floors below the bank, instead of using fake credentials, he used his real identity. It turned out that the police identified and arrested 4 members of that group by pursuing them. Anthony Gavin, Thomas Stephen, and Reginald Tucker were each sentenced to 12 years in prison. However, Benjamin Wolfe, due to his advanced age, was only sentenced to 8 years in prison. After the incident, the police wanted to arrest Robert Lollins for checking wireless frequencies with a radio and listening to their illegal content. However, they regretted his decision because of the help Robert and provided them, and in the end, Robert received £2,500 from the Bank of Louis for his assistance. Although 4 members of this group were behind bars, as I mentioned earlier, the identities of several other members of this group remain unknown to this day. They managed to escape the clutches of the law and create a comfortable retirement for themselves with the money they had pocketed. With the capture of those 4 individuals, only £231,000 of the stolen property was discovered, and the rest remains undiscovered to this day. After the news of this major theft was broadcast, rumors circulated about Princess Margaret's photo with a well-known English actor named John Byron on an island in the Caribbean, associating her with notorious criminals. Her romantic relationship with such a figure was a great embarrassment for the royal family. They did everything in their power to prevent these photos from being exposed to the media. Although this theft was one of the strangest and largest thefts in the century, after a few days, newspapers and magazines surprisingly lost interest in this story. It later became apparent that MI5 had issued orders on behalf of the royal family to silence this affair. It seemed that Gavin and his group had seen things that no one was supposed to know about. While most of the police investigation documents were made public in 2030, there are another 800 pages about this case that have been described as classified for unknown reasons and remain hidden from public view. However, the British government has promised to release this document to the public by 2071, but by then it is likely that everyone involved in this affair will have passed away.